Mm-hmm. Gotta take my shoes.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the World FinTech Festival in Canada. I'm delighted to be here. My name is Jennifer Reynolds, and I'm the President and CEO of Toronto Finance International. Our organization is a public-private partnership between the financial sector and government, and we represent the financial sector globally for Canada. And we also work domestically on issues which go to the growth and competitiveness of the industry. Certainly innovation and our FinTech ecosystem are critical for the success of the industry. And talent is also a very, very important topic and so crucial to our success. And it's something we think a lot about, our talent pool in Canada. So I'm really looking forward to our discussion today. It's a topic that's near and dear to my heart. And it's diversity and inclusion and how Canada views the importance of diversity and inclusion, not just for social justice, but because we think that it makes a big difference to the growth and competitiveness of our country and of our economy. And so we'll talk a bit about our approach specifically in Canada and specifically to FinTech. And I am delighted to be joined by a phenomenal panel here today for this discussion. We are joined by the Honourable Mary Ng, the Minister of Small Business, Export Promotion and International Trade. We're also joined by Vicki Saunders, the founder of SheEO, and Peggy Vanderplash, the founding partner of Roar VC. Thank you so much for joining me, everyone. So I'm going to turn the mic, so to speak, over to each of you to introduce yourselves. So I think it's always more interesting to hear directly from each of you on your background and your role and what your thoughts are, initial thoughts on diversity and inclusion in Canada before we jump into discussion. So Minister Ng, I will start with you.
Well, Jennifer, thank you so very much, and it's terrific to be here with all of you. I have some remarks that I'm going to do as part of my introduction, so I hope that's okay. But I hope that in this it frames it nicely for us to have a conversation. So it's terrific to be here with you. And before we start, I really do want to do an acknowledgement that I always do, and that is I am on the traditional and unceded territory of the Algonquin people, and very pleased to connect with you and with everyone who is here who may be from the various territories and the communities that you're in. And there's no doubt that this year has been a challenging one that has forced many of us to make choices that I think none of us thought were imaginable. Countries everywhere are navigating the second wave of COVID-19, and the best thing we can do here is to ensure that Canadians are safe and that they're healthy and that everyone around the world is safe and healthy so that we continue to take those strong steps in limiting the spread of COVID-19. And at the same time, we've had to work hard to make sure that people are supported economically, particularly our small and medium-sized businesses and the millions of people who they employ, because the millions of the people that they employ, including these small and medium-sized businesses, are owned by, led by, and certainly employ people throughout the country that are representative of our great country. But in helping businesses get through this period is absolutely critical. And making sure that they have the emergency supports that are necessary in things like making sure they are able to pay payroll through wage subsidy, making sure that they have liquidity support through loans, making sure that they have fixed cost support through programs like the rent subsidies. So over the last number of weeks here in Canada, we've certainly seen that there now is hope. A vaccine is on the way, and we are very, very focused on making sure that the supply chains are restored, our diversified trade relationships continue to be strengthened and certainly anchored around rules-based trade. We are part of a conversation today that includes many around the world, and this is really critically important, and particularly important for FinTech that has such a incredible presence here in Canada. And one of the most diverse nations is Canada, and this is what we're here talking about. We're talking about the unique opportunity to diversify how we trade, but also who trades and with whom we trade. And pre-COVID, if I start with women entrepreneurs as as the first component, we can add up to $150 million to the economy by 2026. So Jennifer, to your very point, it isn't the right thing to do. It isn't social policy. It's part economic policy around the world. That number, just simply by adding women to the economy, is worth $12 trillion. So there's reasons to do it beyond good social policy. It's good economic policy. So it's advancing with women's economic empowerment, but our government has also introduced programs that include help for Black entrepreneurship. And the very first program of its kind, the Black Entrepreneurship Program, that is in the order of $221 million to help Black entrepreneurs and business owners in our country be successful. Inclusiveness also ensures more people are included in the economy. So investing millions of dollars to help Indigenous entrepreneurs succeed amid COVID-19, before COVID-19, amid COVID-19, and certainly beyond. Through investments and collaborating with the National Aboriginal Capital Corps of Association. It also means young entrepreneurs who are coming up through the system, who need to be supported and to be successful. And along that sort of line of thinking, making sure that, Jennifer, you talked about skills. CAN code, digital skills for youth. This is about giving young people from underrepresented groups the opportunity to develop those digital skills to participate in the current and future labor markets. So this is all very, very exciting, and there's a lot of work to be done. And at a national level, Canada contributes and participates and leads along with other countries like New Zealand or Chile, where we just over the summer signed a gender arrangement so that we are continuing to promote gender in international trade at the world level. And we're not letting COVID-19 stop us from doing the work that we do. So making sure that we continue to trade and we continue to lead trade missions. So the very first ever virtual trade mission with a women-focused component was just done a few weeks ago to South Korea so that businesses can get into the Asia Pacific. So there's much work to do to rebuild from COVID-19, and there's certainly opportunities for us to be more innovative, more inclusive in the future. And I really strongly believe we have to build a strong recovery and a sustainable future that's going to benefit everyone, and everyone must include women, Indigenous people, young people, small business owners, and FinTech is absolutely a part of this. It's part of the solution, and I know we'll get into this, but its ability to be able to increase access, and increase access for who? For the very diverse entrepreneurs and businesses that we all serve. So it's terrific to be here. I'm looking forward to this conversation. I apologize that my intro might have been a little long, but I wanted to set the context for what the Canadian government is doing, and I'm looking forward to this conversation.
Thank you, Minister Ng. It's glad to hear. I think some of the policies that the government put forward with respect to diversity and inclusion, with respect to making sure that this recovery includes everyone, it's very, very important. So I'm going to turn it over to Vicki next to give us a bit of an intro on your background, Vicki.
Hi, thanks everyone, and nice to see all of you today. It's wonderful to be traveling this way in the new world that we're in. I've been in Singapore, Japan, South Korea, New Zealand, Australia, UK, all these places in the last couple of weeks, so really happy to be here. I'm Vicki Saunders. I'm the founder of SheEO.world. We are I'll call us a FinTech innovation because we're at this today. We're really here to distribute capital in a fundamentally new way so that we can have much more inclusive support of innovators in the world. So roughly 2.2% of venture capital globally goes to women entrepreneurs, which is statistically impossible to occur without massive biases built into our structures and systems. And so it's our belief at SheEO that we need to redesign, use our imagination to come up with new financial models, new ecosystem-based approaches to get money into the hands of women entrepreneurs. If you are a woman of color, these numbers are much worse, 0.006% if you're a Black entrepreneur, which is just staggeringly bad. So we really need to rethink things, and we believe at SheEO that this has to happen at a systems level. You can't just go create a woman's version of the existing models we have. We really need to go deeper and look at those systemic innovations, what the biases and barriers and blocks are. We're operating in 5 countries at the moment with a unique sort of crowdfunding approach to this. Hundreds of women in each country come together, contribute capital in their country. It's pooled together, loaned out at 0% interest. which is now an interest rate that lots of people are talking about. 5 years ago, this was not a thing. They're like, what? So 0% interest is paid back into the fund and loaned out again. So we have this replenishing, renewable resource of finance rolling forward in support of women who are working on what we call the world's to-do list, the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. So we're only putting our capital towards the major global priorities that we're facing. One of the things that we've focused on from the very beginning is a deep definition of diversity. So there's racial diversity, which is critical to what we're doing, but there's also age diversity and geographic diversity and sector diversity and intellectual diversity. So very broadly defined, we're looking for new mindsets and new approaches to doing business and ways of organizing our capital to distribute it for the benefit of the whole. So I'm happy to be here, and I'll turn it back to you.
Thanks so much, Vicki. Look forward to talking more about your experiences. Peggy, I will turn it over to you next for your introduction.
Thank you very much, Jennifer, and it's a pleasure to be with you. It's a tough act to follow, Minister Ng and Vicki Sanders. So that's interesting to be the last. So as I'm sure you can answer originally, there is terrible echo. So maybe everyone can put himself or herself on mute. So as I'm sure you can, France originally, I've been in Canada for close to 20 years now, and my background is in technology, financial services. I've been lucky to work for large banks, large tech companies. I also started 2 fintechs myself, and I manage the family office. So today I mainly do 2 things. I invest in B2B fintechs, and I also advise financial institutions. So I'm very fortunate to be on several boards, and I have been involved in diversity and inclusion for 20 years now. And so it's very interesting being on every seat at the table, from an investor to an entrepreneur to an executive to an advisor, to see the differences actually in boardrooms and in meeting rooms when it comes to allocating capital and support to women. So I'm really looking forward to a discussion and hopefully bringing a lot of insights to our audience and make people think twice sometimes before asking some questions. So really looking forward to that conversation. Thank you, Jennifer.
Thank you, Peggy. Minister Ng, maybe I'll turn the mic back to you just to talk. In Canada, you mentioned a few programs that we have specifically that are working to promote diversity and inclusion in our economy. But I thought you might want to touch further on, small business and in particular our innovation ecosystem here in Canada and some of the programs that the government is putting forward to try to make sure that we're getting the economic development that we want to see in this country.
Yeah, absolutely, Jennifer. That's a terrific question. I mean, when I was appointed this time by the Prime Minister, I became the Minister of both small business and then export promotion and international trade. And really what that means is that 99% of all our businesses in Canada are small and medium-sized businesses. If you take small, so those that are under 50 employees, are 98%. So it's really important that we put a focus on supporting the startup, scale up, and then accessing of new markets for our Canadian businesses. And there isn't a community across the country that you don't see terrific small businesses, and certainly during COVID, the work that needed to be done to just support them was absolutely enormous, and that work continues. And the reason I mention this is because whether, on the one hand, we're seeing some incredible successes that are happening at this particular time that is allowing businesses to innovate and to grow. And that growth, can't be exclusive, sort of at the exclusion of the others that are genuinely challenged at this time. So making sure that there are broad-based emergency management or emergency support programs so that we can bridge businesses to the other side of COVID is really important, because it actually is about communities because those communities are those same customers. They are part of an ecosystem, or just part of community systems across the country. So, so maybe what I'll do is just, sort of chat about one, which is the women's entrepreneurship fund, which really is building on this ecosystem approach. And Vicky talked about sort of a new model of looking at the way in which we need to support women as just one of the segments of small businesses that need the support. And so we as a government have been very, very keen at trying to partner, very, very keen to build upon the networks that already exist across the country through our regional development agencies, very, very keen to collaborate with venture funds or with, with business organizations that already support businesses in this sort of an ecosystem approach, so that we really are sort of, that tide will lift all boats. And so largely our programs are, on the one hand, ecosystem support, and they, and that will range, from networks to mentoring to training and how to help people get through that startup and that scale up. But the other part is direct trying to get at direct access to capital for so many of these businesses that have found it tremendously difficult and a real barrier to not only entry but to growth. And that's a bit of what the Black Entrepreneurship Program is about. And then the third thing I would say, which is sort of the third leg, really important in all of this, is making sure, and I do this with my colleague, we have a minister responsible for diversity and inclusion, and she will say to me every single time, we need to know what we're talking about here. We need to have data. We need to actually know what works, and we need to understand what doesn't. So, but you've got to begin with starting with data. So working with Statistics Canada, we have knowledge hubs that actually that we deliberately have put in place so that we can understand this better. So it will actually help drive the future policy and investment decisions. But I can spend a lot of time on all of this, as we all can. But all this is to say is it really does start with our small businesses, because the greater growth we can achieve at their startup and scale up, the better, the better job creation and economic prosperity we will get yielded to Canada's economy.
Absolutely, and I couldn't agree with you more on the data point. I've had many of those discussions with companies. You got to have the data if we're going to really understand if we're being impactful. Good intentions are wonderful, but we want to see impact. So maybe with that, Peggy, I'll turn it. Sorry, Vicky, I'll turn it over to you, because I know you've been in this discussion for quite some time as well around diversity and inclusion. So wanted to get your thoughts on its evolution, where it's at today, and where do you see the biggest opportunity for us to really drive the opportunities for entrepreneurs?
Well, so yeah, what are we actually talking about from a diversity piece? So there's like the racial diversity piece first, the gender diversity, and then all the other forms of diversity, which we look at really deeply. But I think we've seen quite a shift and an evolution over the last 5 years. So in 2015, when we started SheEO, I remember going on CBC, which is our national radio in Canada, and saying this number, less than 4% of venture capital went to women, and people going, what? Is that true? Like, do women apply? And questioning the statistic, right? Like, how is that even possible? And then thinking there was something wrong with women with that number, obviously not the system. And nobody really talked about systems issues at that point. And I've just seen over the last 5 years, all the trends in the world, the sort of pulling back of the curtain on the biases in our systems and structures. The awareness level of people globally, of policymakers, is just dramatically transformed, I think. And 5 years is pretty fast to see that shift. And so I think now we have quite a bit of data. We have a lot of awareness around these issues. And the question is now, how are we going to do things differently? Because, if you look at wage parity, equal pay for equal work, these things have not changed despite decades of having the data. So we need to actually get into new models and new approaches. And so I'm very excited that people are talking about these things. We're no longer really spending a ton of time about why is it this way, which was really something we did a few years ago, and just going, how are we going to solve this? And so I think that's been a really wonderful shift to see. One of the things that we've really noticed around this is, particularly with women, Relationships are absolutely critical to shift this. And the minister talked about ecosystem approaches and ecosystems. And money is one part of the solution. So access to capital is one element. But one of the other things that's just unbelievable when you get in relationships is, as a women entrepreneur, we often don't have access to influencers, to early customers, to networks to support us. And so we've taken this ecosystem approach where there's capital provided as part of the engagement with CEO, but the larger piece is we have a network full of influencers who open doors earlier than maybe you were going to get before as a small business. And it's really allowed our businesses to outperform their peers who aren't in these kind of robust ecosystem-based networks. And so I think that's something to really look at. And the other piece that we've done very deeply, and I'm seeing this happen in other countries around the world based on the leadership of Canada, is this focus on Indigenous wisdom and creating the conditions for Indigenous women entrepreneurs to thrive. There's an amazing organization called the Lift Collective in Canada, led by Tira Fraser, who has just done a phenomenal job. We've been doing weekly calls over the last 9 months since COVID started, and she's grown that organization from 8 Indigenous women entrepreneurs who came on that first call to 27,000. I still can't believe what they've done together over the course of 9 months. They have this huge gift guide out in the world that has been celebrated, and they're really showing us how when we come together to lift each other up and collaborate, you can really transform systems. So I think this community-based, relationship-based approach is one of the most amazing emergent sort of trends that I've seen, versus this, here's your money, over to you, isolated entrepreneur, despite all the odds, go thrive on your own. That narrative is dying, and we're moving much more to community and ecosystem, which is great.
Yeah, it's interesting. I spent quite some time in the VC community, and one of the things I always lamented is that I didn't see enough women coming in the door. They weren't even getting to pitch. And I was curious, but why weren't they there? Why weren't they pitching? So, Peggy, over to you. Is that changing? Because I'm going back a few years when I was in that community. Are we getting women? Are we getting diversity generally into the VC community, into pitch, into getting those opportunities?
So there are a few challenges that we need to take into consideration on why we see, you mentioned that there is only 3% of dollars that are going to female-only funded companies. There are a few reasons for that. The first one is we have very few women partners in VC firms. And, it's still not, I raise money, going and you're the only woman in a sea of men is still quite intimidating. It's not already very nice to ask for money. It's not the thing you want to do every morning, but on top of that, it's more difficult when you're a woman. And it's even more difficult when you're a woman of color. So if you look at VC firms, you have around 6% of women who are general partners, and only a third of that for women of color. So, there is obviously a challenge when you're pitching some products that maybe are targeted to women and the audience is just, I would say that's the first challenge. The second challenge is very interesting studies have been made by Harvard Business Review showing that when a woman comes to pitch to VC, she has a very different set of than men. And the questions she tends to have are really more prevention focused. So, how are you going to manage your risks? And this type of questions that are very difficult to show your business on the best angle. You're going to have 2/3 of his questions. Promotion. How big can you be? How great your business can be? So just that, obviously makes it very difficult for a woman to show herself in a great light. And the third point I want to make that we don't tend to look at is women have been included in the financial system industry very late. So if you look at Canada, the first bank started 200 years ago. It was BMO. Women were allowed to open a bank account without the authorization of their husband in 1964. Okay, So basically, you have 200 years of history for the oldest Canadian bank, and only 60 years of history for women being able to open a bank account without their husband authorization. So, you know, you need to understand that context. The first VC in North America was started in 1940. 25 years before a woman can open an account on her own. So there are two very big implications to that. The first is that women have a very short institutional knowledge of financial services and raising money, having access to lending, because the system was not built by them for them. And the second thing is that the products that have been developed were developed for men, by men, not for women. And we tend to forget that from a personal point of view, women have very different life cycle. We have longer life. We make more breaks in our careers for the children. We unfortunately tend to earn less money. So there is a huge implication from a personal financial management. But from a business perspective, women also tend to go into areas that are more asset-light, services, healthcare. These are areas where banks or financial institutions don't like to underwrite loan. So women are cornered from every way, I would say, by the system. And Vicky mentioned that earlier. These are systematic approach. You see that in every country. You know, like women were allowed to open bank account alone in 1960. In 1975 in the UK. So Canada is not late to the party. It's the same everywhere in the world, you know. And keep in mind, again, it's always more difficult for women of color. So what I'm telling you that seems already impossible to imagine for a woman, it's even worse for women of color. And we see that today you have new financial impacts. Well, there are women that are involved in that. So I'm going to stop there, but these are three things that I think you really need to keep in mind.
Yeah, one of the topics that has come up, obviously, with COVID is that clearly certain parts of the population are being hit harder than others. And certain parts of the population are falling behind where they were before. Women, we're talking about the she session here in Canada. I think that term is being used more broadly in Canada. And certainly, you know, those who worked in the service sector, those types of jobs are very, very hard hit. I think there's, you know, people dealing with the stress of they can't go back to work, their work isn't there, they've got family pressures at home that are making it, even if you can work in the home, very, very challenging. And I think that's wearing on certain parts of the population more than others. So, Minister Ng, I thought maybe I would start with you. What are some of the things you think we should be doing to make sure we don't fall back further and that we recover faster for those parts of the population?
Yeah, you know what, you're absolutely right, Jennifer. I mean, they were there before. COVID-19 just highlighted the cracks that already are in our system. So this, you know, so you sort of have to take a step back and say, okay, well, what do you do about it? And do you do something about it? You absolutely do something about it. I mean, it's terrific. I have to brag because I just feel so proud about it. I mean, Canada has its first female finance minister, right? The first finance minister, and she just tabled the fall economic statement just a couple of weeks ago. And you'll find in there exactly some of those things, exactly some of the things that we need to be doing as a country. We heard loud and clear, and you know, I mean, the examples that you just said around the difficulties for, you know, a woman-led business, a woman worker, so, you know, the challenges of balancing, of wearing those many hats. I mean, throughout COVID, I've talked to a lot of businesses, and certainly a lot of women businesses, and you see it and you hear it because you see the level of juggling and struggling that has taken place over COVID. So having and what is one of the issues that underline that? Childcare. And the responsibility that women have, to look after their families as well. So we have made a commitment to lay the groundwork for a Canada-wide childcare system. Because it's necessary. This is where social policy must complement our economic policy because they work hand in hand. It is making sure that we will have a strategy that will create 1 million new jobs. 1 million new jobs because those that have been lost through the pandemic and that need to recover from the pandemic, as you said, I mean, many of these jobs are those that affect women, that affect racialized people, that affect our Indigenous people. They affect those that are typically underrepresented. So making a commitment to create 1 million jobs as part of this economic recovery is something that is, is the challenge ahead of us, but also an excellent opportunity, and that commitment is absolutely made, and making sure that we provide training support to those who need it the most, those who are marginalized Canadians who absolutely need it, because I don't know about you, but before COVID-19, a lot of businesses around the country were talking to me about the skill shortage and that our economy was booming. We had the lowest unemployment rate that we had seen in 40 years. We were creating jobs, and the skills that were needed across the country is very real. So as part of this recovery, I mean, the government has given this, the government has given this a lot of thought and has done a lot of work around this, and it's culminated in the in our recent fall economic statement that the finance minister tabled with some concrete commitments that we plan to tackle, and those are a few of the highlights. But suffice it to say that we must do this work. Our economic prosperity absolutely depends on it, which is why we've been so focused on the health and safety of Canadians. We absolutely are, spending sort of making those investments, and they're the right investments because, imagine if we didn't do that. What would happen to small businesses across this country? What would happen to those very women-owned businesses? I mean, the ecosystem that I was talking about, around the women's ecosystem, very early on in the pandemic, the need was there. So we had to just add money to make sure that those ecosystems were supported so that they can continue doing their work. So we've got to transition, and we will transition from emergency support to recovery and prosperity. And we're going to start very much with the commitments we made in the fall economic statement.
So, Vicki, I'm curious to get your comments around this too. When we first started, before we got on stage, we were talking about the stat that in Canada, 80% of businesses that were started since COVID hit were started by women. So how do we support all those women? And what are you seeing in your community, and what can we be doing?
So, yeah, I mean, it's just a staggering statistic, isn't it? And I think, it's not all positive, that number, right? A lot of people are starting these businesses because they just can't cope with the existing rules-based work that we've had in the past, and all the extra things that we have to deal with during COVID, which may be like, 3 to 5 year old kids running around while you're trying to get your work done at home, sort of cut off from a lot of the social supports that we've had in the past. And so I think that's really been hard. I'm so pumped, Minister Ng. Thank you so much around the childcare announcement. I did a couple of presentations to the Finance Committee and to other House of Commons committees around this being the critical action government could take to make a huge difference for women entrepreneurs and women in general. So I'm very excited by Canada's leadership in this. It's literally been on the table for 50 years. We just had the 50th anniversary of the Royal Commission on the Status of Women a couple of days ago, and like 50 years. So it's exciting to see this happening. But one of the things that we've noticed is, again, I mentioned this earlier, but being in community with others, being in relationship and networks with other entrepreneurs to support you during this time, with other people to support you, is going to help you thrive or at least survive during this time. If you're isolated, it's super, super tough. So part of the good news is that, we can digitally be connected now. And so I would just, encourage anyone who's out there sort of struggling with these things to get into local communities around you. The minister has done an excellent job of funding a lot of organizations across the country who are doing this ecosystem-based work. So there are lots of organizations out there. If you're not aware of them, ping me after. I'm on LinkedIn. Really happy to share those things. But this getting into, doing things on our own is really hard. We've been definitely trained that there's scarcity out there. There's not enough for everyone. And I think this is a lie that's unraveling right now, that when we get into community, there's an abundance of need, or there's an abundance of support there. I think the other piece I want to say is I just can't believe how capital efficient women are. And so one of the things that, we've seen $100,000 investment, a small investment, which we did direct investment through the Women's Entrepreneurship Strategy. The federal government did that. I think that was an amazing thing. It's a number that we're doing at SheEO as well, is roughly $100,000 investments can be totally game changing for these organizations when wrapped around with advisors and influencers and people to make introductions for you. So last year in Canada, we saw on average 10 new environmentally and socially sustainable jobs, like good quality living wage plus jobs with each of our ventures. And that is unbelievable for like a small amount of an investment with all of the social capital that comes with it. So I think even just small investments in our small businesses can make a dramatic, have a dramatic impact when it's aggregated together. And I'm quite concerned about what that's going to look like. We've seen a lot of funds, a lot of traditional funding sources retrench during COVID to the existing portfolio they have and kind of doubling down on them. And so we had a real lack of capital going to small businesses before. I think that's going to be amplified in the future. And we also have lots of data showing that investing in those women entrepreneurs helps, but it's not really moving the dial on it. And so that's something that I know that we want to write big checks out to organizations so that they can do big numbers. But the challenge, to the minister's point, and every government struggling with this, is that 99% of our economies are small and medium-sized ventures, and we have to get money directly into their hands, because when we do, they have a huge impact on local employment. So it is a real challenge, and I think we need new pathways to do that. We can't do it through traditional channels that we've had. So it's going to take some experimentation. And during COVID, we've seen lots of good experimentation from governments around this. So excited to see if that will continue.
Peggy, I'd be curious to get your comments around what you're seeing, since COVID hit, in terms of diversity that you're seeing in, potential founders that you're meeting with, or within the companies within your portfolio today.
And I'll piggyback on Vicky's comment, because it's true, everyone has been retreating to the companies that they've already invested in. So if you were not, I would say, part of the few lucky who were able to raise money pre-COVID, it's getting even more difficult. And actually, many studies are now showing that women have been, and when I say women, I really want to emphasize women from all backgrounds, have been the worst hit by the lack of fundraising during COVID. So basically, you're going to see a disproportionate amount, unfortunately, once COVID hopefully is behind us, of women who have had to really bootstrap even more, or even unfortunately close down their business because they couldn't raise and it wasn't sustainable. So it's something that, COVID or not COVID, we need to make sure that money has strings attached. Follow the money is always the best way to make sure that capital is allocated in a way that takes into account diversity and inclusion. We've discussed already how much the ecosystem has been built for a very specific type of people to be successful in, and we need to actually level the playing field. And you need to level the playing field by making sure that when there is money allocated from large pension funds to funds of funds to funds and to entrepreneurs, there are criteria that make sure that we rebalance and that women, people of color, have almost a disproportionate share, because you cannot have a successful economy with only 3% of funding going to women. And Minister Ng mentioned earlier the economic advantage of bringing women to the economy is extremely significant. So we're not talking about doing the right thing out of our good heart. We're talking about doing the right thing for the economy. And it's even more important in the wake of this pandemic. So, you know, unfortunately, again, what I've seen is we're going back, while actually we should disproportionately double down on women and people of color.
I couldn't agree more. And you think about, Canadians are proud of the diversity of our country. It's something we always talk about. When you think about the city I'm sitting in, 51% of the people living here were born in Canada. And I think that's brought tremendous power to our economy. And I think, you know, we should be thinking about how do we take advantage of that in the biggest way that we can. Yeah, I think historically Canada's thought about as the resource economy, and people don't think about us as an innovation hub, but we are, and that is a pillar of our economy, and it's something that you know, I like to talk about all the time when I can, when I'm outside of our borders. But I thought maybe we should think about that and how you think diversity is tied into that innovation that's happening in Canada. And I'll start with you, Minister Ng.
It's absolutely tied to it. I say this as the international trade minister. Canada is so well positioned to trade with the rest of the world because we come from around the world, and I think that advantage is such an opportunity, and we can take it from an untapped potential to an advantage that we will have as a country. We just celebrated 3 years of an agreement, a trade agreement with the European Union just a few days ago or last week, and there were 1,100 participants, 1,100 businesses. I mean, there was a women-led, panel of businesses that are just looking to grow into those markets. I mean, into South Korea, it was over 200 businesses. I mean, these are tremendous numbers. I mean, and I think that this is just sort of, the tip. But innovation is absolutely what we are terrific at. When I think about the research institutions, the universities that we have around the country, we have this entrepreneurial sort of, both not only in spirit, but in that capability of startups. We are beginning to, I hope, build a better venture capital system and just an investment environment. To what Peggy said earlier, I mean, we had to also look very closely at the venture capital funds that the government of Canada was putting out there in the market, and in design, make sure that in those designs that we were looking at innovative models. I mean, and I have to say, I mean, I remember, colleagues saying to me, boy, we're not getting a lot of submissions, but it isn't about the submissions coming in. It's about taking the leadership and insisting on the design. And I think that the work that we're doing on the trade side, around IP, around digital trade, e-commerce negotiations. I mean, what do we do as a federal government? It's to make sure that the global the global trading rules, the multilateral rules-based trading systems are working, and that create that predictable investment and trading environment for Canadian businesses as they grow here domestically, that head into the international market. And I can't think of businesses more relevant than our innovative businesses. During COVID-19, Minister Baines stood up a Made in Canada solution to deal with COVID-19, to make sure we could create PPEs in the country, to create ventilators in the country, to do more of that, that health and bio work that really is here in the country. And so I guess our overarching work that needs to continue is this collaboration between government and the private sector, but also people. Because in doing all of this, we mustn't forget, that's what today's panel is about. It's about inclusivity, and it's about diversity. And it is the right thing to do for our country, absolutely. And I'm thrilled that Canada is absolutely leading the way. I have a feminist prime minister who is very proud to call himself a feminist prime minister. But it takes that kind of leadership. So it isn't just the right social thing to do, while it is, because it'll make for a better country. It's absolutely our economic prosperity, and getting to that diversity and taking advantage of it, creating it as an opportunity to head into those international markets, but also supporting that domestically is the job ahead. Continues to be the job ahead.
Couldn't agree more. And maybe Peggy, you have some perspective, obviously coming from France to here. And what do you think how do you think the diversity plays into our innovation ecosystem and some of the successes that we're having there?
I think that's one of the main ingredient of Canada's secret sauce. This opportunity to have people coming from all around the world. And, we also have a very highly educated, immigration policy. So people who are coming are also bringing a lot of insights from what they learn in their country, from what they're seeing, maybe they're former entrepreneur themselves. So, you really have, again, all these ingredients. And I look at innovation. I was leading innovation for a large Canadian bank. I've been in that ecosystem for 15 years now. And I'm always amazed to see how great we are in Canada. And I see more emphasis from our entrepreneurs to export, which being a foreigner is very important for me. We are discussing that a bit offline. I think, developing solutions in Canada, having in mind from the get-go that it's going to be internationally, it's going to be an international market is very, very important. And I see that shift. And I think the fact that we have more and more immigrants, it's also what brings that shift in mindset from I'm only going to sell in Ontario or in Canada to, well, the world is my oyster. And I think it supports, obviously, the innovation ecosystem very well. So it's extremely linked, which obviously Minister Ng knows very well because it's in our own purview. But, small business, international, we need to stop about thinking about small business as local. It doesn't exist anymore. And that's where innovation plays. So I think we have everything. Maybe sometimes we lack confidence.
I was just having that discussion with a friend of mine on a run, how we don't always talk about the times when we're number one as Canadians. We should do that a little bit more. Vicki, I'll turn it over to you because I know you have a global perspective too. And how do you think we're doing in Canada with respect to diversity and as we look around the world and see how others are doing? Do we have some success stories there that you can think of?
Yeah, we definitely have success stories. And I want to just, tune into this, like Canada as a low innovation nation. I think this is an old narrative it's about the past. And I think many, many things have changed in the conditions in our country. And I don't see that as a thing anymore. And I'd also like to just, shine a light on the fact that we've really only seen the innovation of 50% of the population everywhere around the world. The fact that women haven't been able to access capital, we've stayed smaller. We haven't scaled up our innovations. And I think this is a crazy thing. And so if you start to redesign your systems so that you can actually support women on their own terms, what we've uncovered is this staggering pipeline of revenue generating export potential ventures that are working on the world's to-do list. Like, here come the women, they're coming. And so that unlocking 12 trillion globally that the minister talked about, it's out there. And that needs to come from, deeply leveraged private citizens with government, with private companies, creating the conditions to really see these companies grow. And so, one of the companies that we've seen do very well is a company called the Alinker. And they have designed a mobility device for people who have lost a lot of their mobility. So they, had this insight, 50% of people who are in wheelchairs can still actually move, but there's nothing designed to keep them active. So they actually deteriorate more and more. They start to be excluded. We look down at someone who's in a wheelchair. They start to lose their confidence, and there's a spiral effect. And the Alinker allows you to stay at eye height, be in conversation with people, move with people as you're walking, and you move this with your feet instead of with pedals. And so it keeps you active. And this is such a unique, interesting innovation designed by a woman. And in the early days, she could not get any support. People are like, have you designed a bike before? Have you taken a bike to market? And she's like, no, that's why I came up with this unbelievable innovation, And so our network saw it and went, oh my God, this is amazing. She came in roughly around the 50K in revenue mark, has grown to over $3 million, is exporting to a dozen countries around the world, facilitated a lot by the network connections that have been within our community. You know, as we take our model to different countries, someone in New Zealand goes, oh my God, that's amazing. How do we get it here? And becomes a distributor, and she's pulled into that market. We've also had lots of support from the Trade Commissioner Service from the federal government. So, you know, this idea of like those people who have been put to the margins, like we're not marginalized, we are put to the margins by the existing systems that we have. I think there's just, you know, there's a lot of data out there that shows that those that are on the edges have different perspectives, have unique approaches, and that's where innovation lives. It doesn't live at the center, connected into the middle of things. It really does live on the edges. And so I think that's a huge gift. If you're out there, women have a competitive advantage at this moment, particularly racialized women who are like really excluded. They see things from a different perspective. And we're quite excited by the innovations that we see coming through our pipeline. And I don't know why this is. I was talking to the minister about this a little while ago, but we have not ever seen the quality of applications that we saw this year. We could literally fund the top 40 companies at SheEO. That's never happened before. And 61% of our semifinalists come from Black, Indigenous, or are women of color. So deep diversity from sector, racially, age-wise, and incredible quality. So there's something coming. It feels, you know, there's a momentum building everywhere we turn in the world. We're just seeing women's leadership emerging with these like amazing ideas. And I think Canada has a really deep competitive advantage around this because the world lives here and we are in community together. So I'm deeply optimistic about where things are going. It's going to be bumpy through the COVID piece, but I think we really haven't even seen the tip of the iceberg of the innovation that exists in our country. And when we get through some of these barriers, we're going to see just big shifts.
Great to hear that optimism. That's fantastic. I think, you know, we probably have time for maybe one more question. What should we be asking business leaders to do in the private sector? What to those people who've already made it? What can they be doing to really help our entrepreneurial community and specifically those underrepresented groups that we've been talking about? Minister Ng, I'll turn it over to you.
Be an ally. And but what I mean by that is be an ally, but give of your experience and of your networks to others who would not have access to that. And that's what these ecosystems are about. That is why, you know, I, you know, on behalf of the federal government have the trade toolbox. I mean, I make available Canada's Trade Commission, who works in 160 offices. You know, I make available Export Development Canada, Business Development Canada, Canadian Commercial Corporation. I mean, these are very important institutions, and to me, they are allies of the businesses, the small businesses, the racialized businesses that ever need us to do that work with them alongside. So my advice, be an ally, especially our terrific business leaders in the country. If you want to see greater prosperity and job growth in this country, you have a role to play, and let's use what you've got. And if you're generous to give us of that, to give the people of Canada that would be hugely appreciated.
Couldn't agree more. Peggy, your thoughts? What can business leaders be doing?
Well, I think we need more role model. You know, we were talking earlier about, you know, having a feminist prime minister. I'd like to see a CEO of a large bank being a feminist CEO. I'd like to see the leader of a large telco being a feminist CEO. So very often we tend to think that it becomes the challenge of the people who are at the margin, like Vicky mentioned, and it should be a challenge that is embraced by everyone regarding of their gender and their color, their background. And I would really, really love to see people who are actually not being impacted by this beer embracing the agenda. That's where we're going to have way more power, because otherwise there is always this fear that we're trying to help ourselves. And I really want to have, 100% of the population, not just the 10, 15 or 50% impacted there. So again, I will echo what Minister Ng said. You want to help with opening your network, giving advice and all of that. I think all of us already are doing that a lot, but you need everyone to do that again, not just the people impacted.
Vicki, your thoughts?
Yeah, I'm going to go right at this here, which is like interrogate your leadership. How are you part of upholding racist systems in this world? We got to go there. The self-transformation is absolutely a prerequisite for transforming systems. So if you're a leader who's surrounded by the same people you were pre-COVID, get out of your bubble, change what it looks like at the table, start having conversations that make you uncomfortable. We have to break down and decondition ourselves. You can't just do, add women and stir, create a black version of the existing models. The structures are the problem. So if you have exactly the same structure and you're not talking about how we literally, like, what are the barriers deeply underneath this, it's a problem. And then the last thing I would say is empathy, empathy, empathy. We are seeing inside people's lives, there's a lot more humanity being brought into the workforce, which I'm very excited about. We wouldn't have guessed that people could work at home, or lots of people wouldn't have guessed that. And we're seeing that that's possible now. There's a sort of higher level of trust. And I think really doubling down on our empathy around how complex people's lives are and how business and the workforce really needs to change to actually work better for humans. So those are a few of my thoughts.
Thank you. I do hope that one of the good things that comes out of COVID is hopefully, the barriers around working from home and flexibility and really being, really thinking more about our employees and their families and what they're dealing with outside of work sticks with us. And hopefully we bring that post-COVID into our work world so that it does fundamentally change things and the way we work. Because I think that certainly would help with some of the issues that we're seeing today. Well, we've come to the end of our time. I want to thank our panelists. Thank you so much for joining us today, for giving us your perspectives, taking the time to talk to our audience. It's such an important issue. It's something that Canada is deeply committed to, making sure we are creating a diverse and inclusive society and certainly economy. So thank you, Minister Ng. Thank you, Vicki. Thank you, Peggy, so much for joining us here today. Goodbye, everyone.
Thank you, Jennifer.
Thank you so much. Thanks, Jennifer, for this.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the FinTech Festival in Canada. I'm here with my colleagues from the Future of Work and Learning Coalition in Waterloo Region. We're really looking forward to spending some time together today, answering some of your most critical questions as it relates to the future of work, the work we embarked on together, and how we've readied our region for the future of work and learning. With me today are Dr. Nora McCrae, Assistant Provost, Cooperative and Experiential Education at the University of Waterloo. Simon Chan, VP Talent, Academy and Future of Work at Communitech, and he just so happens to be my co-lead in the coalition in Waterloo Region. And last, but certainly not least, Stephen Harrington, Deloitte's National Leader for Workforce Strategy and the Future of Work Advisory. Before we get to our panel, we're going to ask Simon to take just a moment to share a brief overview of our approach and our initial findings. Simon.
Thank you, Catherine, for your introductions. I'm going to spend a few minutes to set the stage and provide some background on our future of work and learning journey and how we came together as a collective group. At Communitech, which is an innovation hub in Waterloo Region, we work with a diverse group of organizations across the innovation ecosystem. These include startup companies, global enterprise organizations, academia, and public and private sectors. In late 2018, we had discussions with a number of these organizations about what were some of the challenges in continuing to keep pace with the rapid changes in technology and innovation in digital. In talent attraction, skills development, and the changing nature of work were topics that bubbled up to the surface, the future of work. A number of the organizations we talked to were just starting to think about how they might tackle some of these challenges. However, there's a few organizations that were already starting to lead the charge, and those organizations are the ones today on the panel: Manulife, Deloitte, and University of Waterloo. We realized early on in our discussions that the future of work and learning was a system-wide challenge, not one that any one organization could solve for on its own. So we decided to take a collective approach. So on January 29th, 2019, we hosted our very first Future of Work and Learning community event, where we brought together leaders from across the business sector and academia and private and public sector to talk about what is the future of work and why should you care. Now, interestingly enough, that day, it was a huge snowstorm, very Canadian, and our keynote speaker, David Mallon from Deloitte, was snowed in Minneapolis. So we decided that he would deliver his keynote address via video. So if you can look there's some video screens. And I remember thinking at the time, that was just really, really odd to have a conference or a keynote done by video. So looking back, I guess that was very just 2019. Even though it was a snow event that day, we still had over 125 community and business leaders attend the event. And we knew that day that this topic was something that our ecosystem would want to explore further. So throughout 2019, we held a variety of workshops with organizations so they could learn more about the trends that were impacting the workplace, and also hear from the workforce and talent itself on their perspectives of work and how it was changing. In November, we decided to form a coalition of partners who agreed to pilot working together for a year to tackle some of the common challenges we identified around the future of work. When we thought we would have over a couple of years to be able to tackle becoming future ready and preparing our workforce for workplace and workforce trends, but COVID hit us. And I can still remember driving down the 401 on March 12th to a community event in Windsor where we planned to share our coalition approach with their community leaders at their request. It was on that drive down that I heard that the cancellation of the NBA, Tom Hanks had contracted COVID, and many businesses were moving to remote. And that is when I realized the future of work was going to become the present of work. Now that you have a little bit of history and background, I'm going to provide a bit of an overview of the coalition and our collaborative approach before we get into the panel discussion. So as I mentioned, the Future of Work and Learning Coalition was formed in November, and the partners come from across academia, private and public sector. So these include Waterloo Region's municipalities, Workforce Planning Board, Chamber of Commerce, university and colleges, and a spectrum of startup to large enterprise organizations. Our challenge for the future of work we identified was one that was very complex and one that no one single stakeholder could solve for on their own. And our goal was to really build healthier workplaces and more resilient communities so that we could propel our community forward. So the coalition approach was inspired by Stanford's collective impact model, where a group of organizations come together, rally around a common agenda or set of priorities, supported by a backbone organization, in this case, Communitech, which is a not-for-profit, to help coordinate the group's efforts. The focus of the collaborative model is to build mutually reinforcing activities around those common priorities, align on some shared themes and metrics, and ensure that there's continuous communication across these various partners. So as part of our early research process in 2019, we complemented a lot of the secondary research that we were doing with some primary research through individual interviews and several community-based design thinking workshops to help our leaders understand the goals, the motivations, career paths, and pain points across various personas that were being impacted around the future of work. And some of those personas that we looked at were early career, mid to late career, freelancers, and the participants came from across private sector, public sector, and manufacturing, as we have a large manufacturing presence in Waterloo Region. These workshops helped our coalition partners align on some common priorities, which include how we might promote work-integrated learning, so more co-op, apprenticeships, and internship programs. How do we help workers mid-career with continuous learning, reskilling, and upskilling? And how do we help employers understand the changing expectation of their worker or the workforce, particularly the early career? And we began digging into the topic of gig and freelance workers. And most recently, due to COVID-19, our organizations are working together to look at how we might redesign leadership and workplace practices to adapt to a remote and hybrid work environment. So to close, here are the goals and objectives of our coalition. Well, the first thing we wanted to do is work together to create a playbook for how other ecosystems and communities could collaborate. And we've shared some of this knowledge with communities like Halifax and Windsor. And the idea is to build a network of networks, communities of practice across Canada. We also wanted to run some active pilots and act as a bit of a petri dish for some of these future of work initiatives. And we agreed that it would be important to open source these learnings so that we can share them across our coalition and community. And we wanted to help champion the conversation around how we can make Canada future ready, which is one of the reasons why we were so excited to be asked to be part of this virtual talent summit as part of the FinTech Summit. So now that we have a bit of background, I'm going to turn it back over to Catherine to moderate our panel discussion.
Fantastic. Thanks, Simon. Before we get started into the trends and what our coalition has been up to, I'm going to ask each of our panelists to share a little bit about their role and how it connects to the future of work and learning. Stephen, I'll start with you.
Sure, thanks. So, you know, I've been working on the future of work file since 2011, believe it or not. We wrote our first position paper back then, way before it was cool. But my job ostensibly is to think about the future on behalf of the Canadian member firm. And I'll let you all in on a little secret. The reason that I do that is because in order to set a workforce strategy, we need to think about the future. Right? It's that simple. You know, unfortunately for many of us, including our own firm, it's a lot easier to think about next week or next quarter. But when we cast our minds into 3 to 5 year timeframes, then really interesting options start to emerge. That had been why it was important to me up until, I don't know, around February, March this year. I'm already trying to get into 2021. So that obviously has changed things significantly. Now it's become a strategic imperative for everyone.
Amazing. Thanks, Stephen. Nora.
Thanks very much, Katie. As mentioned, I'm the Associate Provost for the Cooperative and Experiential Education Program at the University of Waterloo. And in a nutshell, my program connects students at the University of Waterloo to the world of work. And we do that a number of ways, through our world-renowned co-op program, where students are actually working in industry while they're doing their degrees, and our career programming as well. So my role, very much in the way that Stephen has articulated it, is to think about, if we are connecting our students to the world of work, what do our students need? What skills do they need? What capabilities do they need? How can they best navigate a future workplace? And so being engaged in this Future of Work Coalition was very much from the position of early talent and young talent, and how to help that talent get into the future of work successfully.
Wow, I think we're in for a really exciting panel, folks. I'm going to head over to Simon to talk about Unitech and his role there.
Thanks, Katie. Yeah, so how we got involved in the future of work, as I mentioned, was we support organizations of all sizes, startup organizations, scaling organizations, and large enterprise organizations with their innovation efforts. And obviously, a big part of that comes down to how do we actually ensure that we attract the talent, and we ensure that to need to grow our ecosystem, so our organizations, as well as ensure that those who are working in these organizations continue to keep pace from a skills development standpoint. And so that's really our focus is really around it's really about building ecosystems and ensuring that the companies across our ecosystem in Waterloo region, but across Canada, because I think our nation is a bit too small to not collaborate. We thought this was a really interesting idea to bring together a group and experiment on how we might do this together. And to our knowledge, we're the first community in Canada that's actually taking this on, so it's a pretty exciting opportunity.
It's certainly been a pretty incredible opportunity to be a part of. I'm going to head into trends. I'm really curious to hear your perspectives on the future of work. Everyone is talking about the pace of change and digitization, but what do you think is not getting enough airtime that needs to be discussed? Nora, I'll start with you.
Thanks very much for the question. Well, of course, and from my perspective, as I introduced, what I don't think is getting enough attention, and we should be thinking about, is as we are in a remote work environment, and likely to continue much more so than we were pre-COVID, when COVID is behind us, we need to think about, what does that mean for young talent? How do we recruit young talent in this way? How do we onboard them? How do we make them feel part of a team? How do we help them become productive experience. We've been able to share some of our insights with others as well. For example, I mentioned, well, it has been mentioned some of the work that was done on the scorecard, but we've also done some of our own research on, as soon as COVID hit, we had about 8,000 students who were in workplaces, and we've done research on what the response was that made a difference for them in working remotely. So we have that data now from the students' perspective and also from employers' perspective, which we'll be able to add into this additional project that Simon is mentioning. And finally, we've had some research that we've been doing on Gen Z and what are their values and what are their motivators and what's important around that and how that also plays into the future of work. So my point is that we have been and will do work in this space anyway. And so it's great to be able to contribute it and leverage it and amplify it and learn from others in the coalition.
Thank you. I don't know, we've taken your research in my organization and certainly used it to change the conversation and rethink how we think about onboarding as an example for our future workforce. So thank you for sharing the research. Simon, how does what we're working on individually benefit the whole coalition? Nora started to talk there, but I wonder if you can expand a bit.
Yeah, so I think about it in kind of two ways in terms of how organizations, they're working on their individual projects, but they bring two things to the table that I think are really interesting. So first is knowledge, right? So each of the organizations, because of the diversity of the expertise that they bring, it changes the conversation, right? So you just made you used the example of the Gen Z work that Nora and her team have been working on. Well, that is individual work that they've been doing that could have sat in isolation, right? And of course it wouldn't, because we do talk about these things, but it was in a very focused way to be able to bring some of that research to the betterment of the other organizations and see how it could be applied. So the first one is really the knowledge piece of it, and the second piece is capabilities. I think all of us bring very interesting capabilities to the table that actually add to the overall mix of working together. So I'll give some specific examples. So from a Communitech perspective, one of the things that we bring from a knowledge perspective is kind of the innovation space. So the design thinking space, working with startups and working with enterprise organizations who are thinking through the innovation side of things. We can bring to the table our perspective on how those organizations work together and how they could work together. We also sit at kind of the center of not just the startup and enterprise organizations. We work with academic institutions. We work with our municipalities. So again, the knowledge that we bring is the knowledge of what's important to each of those various sectors. And we can act as a bit of a translator, if you will, to be able to find areas of alignment to bring those groups together to talk about those particular areas from a different perspective. So as I mentioned, we've had a lot of our webinar series that have been doing that, but then also just our general forums. It's been great. We've been working together for, feels like 2020 feels so long, but for over a year now, and we've built some really interesting relationships across the coalition for them to not only share knowledge in a formal setting, but I think there's been a lot of informal sharing of knowledge as well. So that's the first one. The second one, from a capability perspective for Communitech, is just bringing in the ability to help organizations come together to collaborate. That's the capability that we bring around convening and collaborating. And so we've brought that piece of the ingredient to the table. To give you a couple of other examples of organizations within our coalition, one of the organizations is Morneau Shepell. Morneau Shepell is a global leader in mental health. So they have a deep expertise in mental health, but they also have a number of capabilities as it relates to mental health in the workplace that they can bring to the table as we think through things like, as we redesign remote and hybrid work. Well, there's going to be, obviously, productivity and mental health are a very important piece of that. And so what types of knowledge and expertise could they bring to the table? Obviously, the academic institutions bring a lot of research capabilities to the table, which is, we want a balance of action and research. So really, each of the organizations bring both knowledge and capabilities, and we really think the whole is greater than the sum of its parts. And really, that's the idea of bringing those groups together.
Amazing. Thanks, Simon. If other communities across the globe want to start their own coalition, what advice would you give them? Stephen, I'll start with you because I know you've looked at this issue globally as well. So curious on your thoughts. And then Simon, Nora, I'll turn it to you for your thoughts as well.
Yeah, I've pitched in on quite a few coalitions, and there's a reason I'm here hanging out with you guys is how well you've done it. The hardest thing to me to try and figure out is how to get diverse stakeholder groups to really not just join but lean in with their resources and their thinking. I've seen coalitions that, for an example, bring everybody together, but then they're allergic to the profit motive, or they invite educators, but they say, oh, the last thing the future of work needs is more research. So there are these little ways that you can, or some that don't know what a social entrepreneur is, so they're not really bringing in those grassroots folks that are thinking about this differently. So I'm framing the problem, which is the easy part. The hard part is figuring out how all of those motives can work together, because sometimes they do come into conflict. The second thing I'd say is, future of work is at once about, I think, Simon, you were kind of mentioning this in a way, like it's at once about every organization, big and small, and what they're going through, but it's also at the same time macroeconomic. So the other difficult thing is figuring out what's your strategy, what are you going to lead, what are you going to focus on, and being very sharp and clear about that so that everybody knows what to do. But the last bit of advice that I'll give is think big. No matter what your strategy is and what you focus on, I'll give you a quick example. When it comes to remote work, this distribution of work in a country like Canada is actually, from a macroeconomic perspective, very exciting if we can figure it out. We could really start to employ the rural, the remote, and the hard to employ, who have been frankly left out of the best of the market economy to date. And we might see these big shifts if that happens from urban downtown business centers into suburban and rural. So you're going to see these huge shifts in community and urban design. Like you can see again how it goes from a small topic to a big topic again. And we have to be planful. We have to design these things rather than let them happen organically if we want the optimal result. And
the intentionality and the No, I love the intentionality of it. I love the belief and the hope that you're sharing too, Stephen. I think it's pretty incredible. Simon, thoughts?
Yeah, so Communitech being a bit of the kind of the backbone organization is trying to coordinate these activities. Stephen's 100% right. It's a very challenging endeavor to bring together organizations who have different priorities, different timelines and expectations, different levels of resources that are available to be able to dedicate to this work. In our experience, I guess the advice that I would give is I would think about this as really change management. How do we think through this as a change management process? So the first thing I would say is you need to create a sense of urgency. Now, COVID has, again, given us a bit of a lightning rod to think about this. But you do need to create a sense of urgency. You need to start with the why to ensure that organizations and communities or ecosystems understand why they need to act now, why it's not something they can just wait, 3 to 5 years, and what's the competitive imperative in order to think about this topic. So the first one, I think, first step would be around thinking about creating that sense of urgency. The second one is alignment on vision. And we use the word vision, in that grandiose way, but it is really alignment on if you're going to come together as a group, what is it that you're really trying to solve for, right? At a macro level, and getting to ground on definitions, which is part of the reason why we created the scorecard, because organizations like the ones who are on this particular panel, they've been thinking about future of work. They've been researching future of work. There's a lot of organizations that are out there that this is not something that's even on their radar. So how do you create a common vision? How do you create a common framework for organizations to understand what we're working on? And then obviously from there, it's really around communicating that vision, making sure that people are aligned. And then I would say you want to think grandiose, because I think that's what we need as a nation and as communities to do. But very, very quickly, the things that you're going to tackle, you're going to have to balance the grandiose with what are the short-term wins, what are the things that really are things to gain momentum, so that the organization sees successes and the value of working together. And maybe I'll just add a couple of lessons learned, if you will, because we've been at this for a little while. One of the things is if you don't find a way to align the projects and priorities of what you're working on with the organizational priorities first, and then the coalition priorities, it's not going to work, right? The organizations that I have seen lean in the most, they have been able to pinpoint that, you know what, as Nora said, I'm already working on the future work and preparing students for the future workplace. This is an add-on. This is an accelerant. This is a way for me to learn from others in terms of how do I do it better or do it differently or challenge my perspective. And once you get that mindset, I think that there's the buy-in. The other piece I would say is just organizational buy-in. We're blessed to have some great representatives across our coalition members and some very senior individuals, the folks here as well. But how do the folks here who are representatives on the coalition take the concept of a coalition and take the concept of those learning and actually scale that within their organization so that it's not just dependent on one person who's showing up and saying, this is really neat, that it is something that they can take back and actually scale within the Manulifes, the Deloitte, the University of Waterloo's, the Desire to Learns, whoever they are, scale it so that they see this as part of an organizational priority. So those are some of the challenges I would highlight, and just maybe some of the advice that I would give is around think of this as a broad change management exercise.
And Simon, I just thought I'd pick up, like, I don't know why, but I was thinking of a rephrase, it would go think big, act small, right? And it's that balance that you're trying to strike, which is so fantastic.
Thank you both. Nora.
Yeah, no, that's great. I would say some suggestions for others that are thinking about this is it is about getting that shared vision and the right people around the table who can both think big but also act. We've all been part of groups, committees, tables, round tables where there's a great deal of wonderful ideas that fly around, but nothing ever moves forward. And so that combination of who's at the table, but also the backbone structure is absolutely critical. So Simon, you mentioned that this is a change management exercise in the sense that you need to create a sense of urgency, and COVID did that, but COVID could also have killed the whole thing because it could easily have come in and people could have said, forget it, we're overwhelmed with managing with COVID. Why are we spending our time on this? And I think that because the backbone structure was so strong and because the strategy had been to come at this from the perspective of what do the stakeholders need, how is it going to meet their needs as well as the coalition's needs, and that communication was there, and the iterative nature of how we shifted priorities over the course of the time together, I think has resulted in a lasting coalition that has withstood the challenges of COVID, which is something. So those are some key ingredients that I would add. I also want to say that one of the things that I've appreciated is that we've engaged students in this too. Some co-op students were hired to do some of the research to engage, and that's been really good too, because there's nothing like having students involved in a project to keep you on your toes and make sure that you're thinking about things in a way that includes their view of the world and their lived experience too. That's what I would say.
Thanks so much, Nora. I know when we were doing some of the primary research with our students, I'm sadly in the mid-career cohort, and just hearing with deep empathy and curiosity their values and what they're looking for in work was absolutely incredible and very eye-opening. So I'm thrilled that we had them involved as well. The other piece I'll add for the folks on the phone in terms of lessons learned, and Nora, you and Stephen reiterate this to us all the time, and it served us incredibly well, is to agree on frameworks or agree on research principles upon which we'll build our projects and our thinking. So it just helps to ground us in good, solid thinking and structure as well. So thank you both for contributing that and much more to the coalition. As we start to head to wrap up, I'm not going to invite you to share a piece of advice or a key learning with those folks on the phone. Instead, I'm going to invite you all to leave the audience with a question you'd like them to think about or to ask as they head back into their daily lives. Nora, I'll start with you.
Thanks very much. And, considering that the audience, I imagine, is predominantly, one would think, coming from the FinTech industry, the question I would leave is, what strategies have you put into place, either with your local higher education providers or with others, to foster and recruit and attract and consider bringing in young talent that can be well prepared to contribute to the FinTech industry and to help keep that industry thriving?
Oh, I love that question. Stephen.
What are the scenarios that you should be thinking? Like, try and pick 3 scenarios for the future that might be wildly different, or at least substantially different, that you need to prepare for 5 years down the road. And most importantly, how are the humans in your business and in your ecosystem going to be impacted? These are sort of the conditions for workforce strategy, as I said earlier. And, you know, the other thing I'd add to why that's an important question, it might seem like, you know, if you're in FinTech, isn't this about technology? I do think that sustainable technological advantage is now in the hands of very, very few. And for those that have it, it doesn't sustain for that long. So the last bastion of strategic advantage is the human. And that's why I think that's an important question.
I like that one too. Simon, hard act to follow these two. What are you going to say, buddy?
Yeah, I know. I don't know. I don't really know what to say. No, I think that the question I get people to think about and ask themselves is, given what we've talked about today, is this something that you think your organization can tackle on its own? And as we think about, you know, the talent landscape, whether it be FinTech, whether it be our region and Waterloo region, Ontario, Canada, et cetera, are we big enough as a nation to be able to compete for the global talent that we need in order to sustain our organizations, in order to sustain our communities, and in order to sustain Canada as a leader in innovation and technology? And that's where every country is going. So when I think about it, the thing I'd ask yourselves is, A, are you even starting to think about what this means from a talent attraction standpoint? But if you are, does it make sense for you to work on this on your own, given the system-wide nature of this challenge? Or is it better for you to work with others in a diverse group to be able to understand what are some of the common challenges, learn from others, in the right situations where you have common priorities, collaborate with each other? And, you know, I think about, you know, kind of the vision for our coalition we started here in the community. I'd love for other communities and other ecosystems in Canada to adopt you know, a similar model where they're collaborating. And really why I want that is because I know there's things happening in other communities across Canada that we could learn from, and that it would benefit our organizations, our academic institutions, et cetera, if we found a way to be able to take those learnings and scale those across. So, you know, I get you to think about, is this something you want to solve on your own, or is this something that you might be best off to collaborate on? And I'll leave you with kind of the analogy I love to use around collaboration, which is Peloton racing. So folks who have raced on Peloton bikes, you know, you've got individuals, you've got teams who are entering a race. And for, you know, I don't know what the percentage is, but I'll say it's 95% of the race. You know, what they do is those racers will work together, draft each other. Some might take a lead for a period of time. Some might hang back. Others will then take the lead, and some others will hang back. And they are racing together for the first 95%. They still need to compete on their own for talent, in this analogy, for the last 5%. But what they've done is they've raised the bar by collaborating in the first 95%, and they're only competing on the last 5%. And so that's the thing I would leave as a bit of a takeaway for people to think about is this something that you want to tackle on your own, or is this something that you are best to tackle within your community or across other ecosystems to really bring this to life?
That's amazing. Thank you all. I think you've left the audience, and certainly me too, with some great questions to think about. There's 4 things or 4 themes that came through all of your answers today that really stuck with me. One, the power of collaboration. And Simon, you know, I don't think I could have said it any better myself in terms of the metaphor. I think it was absolutely perfect. We also talked a lot about skills and the skills we'll need for the future and how we predict that and how we work together to do that. And then hand in hand with that, the notion of lifelong learning. It will never, ever stop. And what is the best way for us to learn in the future? The other element is technology and humans working together, but really with a focus on a human-centric future where we rethink jobs, we rethink how teams come together and what work might actually look like, and the whole notion of complex systems across the globe. So I think you've given us all very much to think about, a lot to believe in, if I do dare say that as well. So thank you very much for joining us today. Audience, thanks for joining us. The next up is a discussion presented by the Toronto Finance International's Aspire program on developing next-gen talent in financial services. So in just a few minutes, hope you'll join us there too. Thank you.
Thank you, Gary.
Thank you.
Welcome to the FinTech Festival in Canada. My name is Sasha D'Souza, and I'm the Senior Vice President of Talent Initiatives at Toronto Finance International. Thank you for joining us. In this third and final session of the festival's Talent Summit, we explore innovative approaches to building a diverse, work-ready pipeline of early talent, both during the pandemic as well as over the long term. And so to that end, we brought together talent leaders from industry and academia to discuss how they're attracting and preparing the next generation of talent in financial services. You'll hear about initiatives at an organization level, sector-wide collaboration, as well as industry-academia partnerships. And we'll evaluate the impact of our efforts through the eyes of two post-secondary students who are also joining us today. Our discussion is going to proceed in a Q&A format, where I'll first direct questions that the TFI team has prepared to the panelists, and then we'll have about 10 minutes for audience questions. So please feel free to submit your questions through the live Q&A chat box, and we'll get to as many as we can. So with that, let's begin by meeting our panelists. Kavita, we'll start with you.
Thanks, Sasha, for the introduction, and hi to everybody here. My name is Kavita, and I work with Swiss Re in our Canadian offices. I'm an HR business partner, focusing both on our Canadian business as well as our US business.
Thank you, Kavita. Mike, over to you.
Thanks, Sasha. My name is Mike Shelson, and I am the Global Head of Talent Development and Campus Recruitment at Scotiabank, with our focus on all of our business lines globally.
Thank you. And Mark.
Thanks, Sasha. Hi, everyone. My name is Mark Hanna, and I'm the chair for the School of Accounting and Financial Services at Seneca College, and really looking forward to the discussion today. Thanks.
Carla.
Thanks, Sasha. Hello, everyone. I'm Carla Badger-Brown. I'm the director of Aspire. That's a work integrated learning pilot program that is led by Toronto Finance International in partner with 20 financial services organizations and 43 schools, post-secondary schools across the country.
Thank you, Carla. And we will meet our two students. Alice?
Hi, everyone. My name is Alice. I am completing my third year of chemical engineering studies at the University of Toronto. I'm so excited to be here. I was actually the Aspire Challenge finalist in the 2018-2019 year. And I guess fun fact, I was born in Singapore, born and raised in Singapore. So this is honestly really surreal for me to be here right now.
Thank you, Alice. We're excited to have you with us. And finally, Janetta.
Thank you, Sasha. Hi, everyone. My name is Janetta Lutich, and I'm a fourth-year student at McMaster University studying actuarial and financial mathematics.
Thank Thank you all for participating. Let's get started with our first theme, which is student attraction. So Mike, my first question is over to you. And it's getting into the area of skills, the skills that we need. So specifically, what fields of study has Scotiabank been hiring from over the past 3 years? Has there been a shift in the skills that you're seeking, particularly as your organization increasingly leverages technology and innovation to drive growth, which is a common theme for our organizations across the financial services sector?
Yeah, thanks a lot, Sasha. That's a great question. You know, I think often about the impact of hiring different skill sets in our organization. In fact, I really believe I wouldn't be in this job if it wasn't for the fact that we've seen a massive explosion when it comes to the different types of profiles that we're looking to hire off of campus, specifically those profiles in the tech space. And so why I say that is because if I rewind, you know, you mentioned 3 years ago, if I go back maybe 4 years ago when I took this role on, I would say that the financial industry in general in Canada was largely focused on a lot of what I would call traditional talent, right? And this talent would be, you know, those studying business in business schools. Business schools even took a different approach to how they educated their talent into business school. And so we were all pretty good at hiring that talent. It's really the focus towards some of our, you know, the STEM talent, you hear that word often, STEAM talent now. And so we started brand new programs. Those programs had a bit of a snowball effect. So we started with a tech program, and that led to programs across all of our different business lines, whether they're directly involved in technology or whether they're core business lines in our organization. And one of the things that we noticed is that as more and more of our different subsets or lines of businesses were getting interested in hiring tech talent, and the reason why they were is simply because what they were finding is we're getting a new perspective. We're all learning new ways of working, and they seem to be at the forefront of this. But as they started opening their eyes to more tech talent, it demanded more tech programs and it demanded more talent development programs, because as you can imagine, bringing people in from different backgrounds and having them come in and try to learn a more of a traditional business line, we had to fill that knowledge gap. And so we've seen a massive explosion in hiring this STEM talent in our traditional fintech spaces, like our digital factories at Scotiabank, for example, of course, but even into core business lines. And one of the nice things about it, if you ask me, is, you know, the programs and the way that our managers across our business lines looked at hiring as a result of the influx of tech talent actually has reached into areas like core inclusivity and diversity. And why that is, I think, is because we saw, wait a second, if we bring in people who have a tech background and we're able to accelerate their careers and give them fill some of those gaps, let's say in our tech development programs and our core development programs, what else can we do? And so we've reached out and we've been able to hire people across all segments, and it's opened the eyes of our business managers to be able to say, maybe I should look at non-traditionals, maybe I should look in new places, because maybe what we're after is less of a knowledge when you're thinking about next-gen talent, and maybe what we're really after is more of a skill set, a focus on problem solving, a focus on a different point of view, and so on and so forth. So that sort of technology boom when it comes to talent has had much further of a reach than just hiring into traditional tech roles in our organization. And really, it's reached everywhere, even into the D&I space.
Thank you, Mike. That's great. That's a great backdrop for the rest of our discussion. Kavita, I want to ask you the next question, and it's related. Mike's done a good job of outlining the kinds of skills, and I think they represent, although that Mike was speaking from Scotiabank's perspective, they represent what the sector is looking for. And so, Kavita, I want to ask you, when we think those are the skills we're trying to attract, what are some of the challenges that we've had, that the sector's had, that Swiss Re's had over the past few years in attracting students learning these kinds of skills, these kinds of in-demand skills? What have we been up against over the past few years?
Yeah, great question, Sasha. And it absolutely is a challenge. So I think Mike has clearly outlined that these STEM skills, these STEM professionals have really started to become an integral part of our workforce, right? And so this has opened a whole slew of new opportunities for STEM professionals. And from their perspective, doors are being opened at companies that perhaps wouldn't have been part of the equation before, So that's quite exciting. I do feel Canada has a strong talent base. Specifically, if you look in Ontario and close to home, that Toronto, Kitchener, Waterloo region is really a large producer of STEM graduates. But despite this, I still find that Canadian financial services firms are competing the talent, and they're not competing against each other. But of course, we've got those traditional tech firms that we need to compete against, the Googles and the Apples of this world. And now we've got the FinTech startups that are coming up, and they're more smaller, but they're absolutely becoming more attractive. We're continuing to lose talent to the US, right? So we've got some of the big giants that I just mentioned, but then some of these Canadian FinTechs are starting to be acquired by these US companies, and that then also starts to take the talent away from local. So studies have shown that STEM students are aware of financial services firms, but they don't necessarily identify these firms as ones that they would consider working upon graduation. And that's really what we need to change and look at. So let's maybe think about why this may be. And I think we've heard time and time again, I've certainly heard it, the negative perceptions that perhaps STEM students have of our industry. You know, we're too hierarchical, we're less nimble, slow progression, boring culture, the lack of technological advancement, you know, limited clarity on an individual's value. And I truly think that list goes on. So although financial services may be able to offer pay and in some cases stability, I think what some of the other companies are doing is using some of these non-financial benefits to attract employees. These are companies that are quite purpose-driven, so what they do makes a difference, and they'll easily be able to show that. They can easily show their purpose and their value, and I think employees want to be associated with a brand that is able to do that. A lot of these companies are fairly flat, they have agile teams, they have the ability for employees to move from one project to another, and they don't let those traditional organizational structures and those reward structures get in the way of this. And that's maybe a disadvantage that some of the financial institutions have, because we're large, we have a lot of history, and therefore we're quite traditional in size and nature, and it doesn't quite flow with what some of these new graduates are looking for. Some of these companies are absolutely leveraging technology, and they actually are able to use that technology to enhance the employee experience. So managing an employee's benefits, their learning and development, seeing internal career opportunities, having feedback at their fingertips. They want to see that technology is also being leveraged not only for the customer, but for themselves as employees as well. And I say all this, and I want to add that positive piece in. So I'm not saying that financial services firms don't offer any of the above. I actually think we've made a real shift, and we're starting to offer everything that I've just described. The problem is we've not easily recognized that these are some of the top things that we need to rave about when it comes to attracting this next gen talent. And so we need to change that shifting, that shift, I guess. And we're starting to see that shift. We're starting to see financial services firms, the banks, the insurance companies really understand what's important to a graduate and start to sort of really leverage and rave about some of those items.
Thank you, Kavita. I love that answer. And let's continue to build this story. So we've talked about the skills that we need in the sector, some of the challenges that we as organizations are coming across to get those skills. But I know there are a lot of success stories, and I know that both your organizations and your industries are showing progress in this space. So I want to keep on this stream and turn back to you, Mike, and ask, so how are you attracting these skills? What is Scotiabank doing? What are some of the programs that you have that's been successful?
Probably shouldn't be on mute, but Kavita, you know, you mentioned we're kind of old rusty dinosaurs in the eyes sometimes of some of these, you know, STEM talent, right? Some of the STEM students that are out there. And we've done a lot. We as an industry have done a lot over the last little while in Canada specifically around how do we change that? How do we change that perception? You know, Kavita mentioned the fact that there's a lot of good stuff that we do, but I don't know that STEM students in general are necessarily thinking of us that way. one of the major advantages of working in this industry is just the breadth of different opportunities you have. So, I always go back, I'm an accountant by trade. And so I think about, if I wanted to go and hire accountants, I'd probably want to have a whole bunch of accountants go and hire these accountants, right? What is an accountant? Accountant is someone who maybe is reluctant to change. Accountant is maybe someone who is very technical, maybe not the best with people, right? And so now I send out a whole bunch of these people who are reluctant to change, technical, not great with people, to go and hire what? Technical, not great with people, into your organization. And if you do that for a while, and we've seen some of this in some of the big four and how they've shifted their own, the way that they've recruited, what happens is you're just going to continually bring more and more and more of the same into your organization. What we've realized in the financial industry is that it would be the same thing for us. If we were to go and send a whole bunch of bankers to go and hire traditional bankers, then you're never going to be able to appeal to this STEM talent. So I think first of all was, how do we change our approaches so that they reflect some of these advances in technology? So, we no longer, at Scotiabank, I'll speak specifically to one of the things we're doing, we no longer accept student resumes, right, for any job across the organization. And why this is cool is because, and I love Alice's face, and she's like, oh my gosh, right? Because so that's the proof. Because at the end of the day, the students go, wait a second, that's a little bit different, and then they want to know why. And when they start to find out that the reason is because we don't want to pigeonhole you to what you can do based on what you studied for 4 years in school. Because I can tell you right now, Janetta and Alice will be the first ones to tell us when they graduate, they're going to feel like they know this much. It's really after working for a couple years that they're going to feel like they actually start to handle it, and they can get it their sea legs under them, right? And so from my perspective, get rid of the resumes. Stop trying to say, you studied that or this, or you've got these experiences and that's what's going to speak to you. That gets students looking at us differently. They gets them to say, why, what's up with that? And then we layer on technology. So we layer on, for example, we use Plum, but I mean, this is not an endorsement for Plum. There are many technologies that are out there. And when you think about that, what this does also from a student's perspective, gets them to think like, wow, Scotiabank is assessing us a little bit differently. Scotiabank is using technology the right way. So, it allows them to see us in a good light. And then what we're able to do is put forward some of the awesome work we've done in the background, developing technology programs in the organization. So those are really important, because what I find is, doesn't matter if you're a STEM student, core business, actuarial sciences, right, Janetta? You really, at the end of the day, no matter what you're studying, you want to have a career with work-life balance. You want to have a rewarding career. You want to be paid well for what you do, right? Or else you wouldn't dare go to all those boring classes, right? And you want to make sure at the end of the day that you love what you do. You feel like you're contributing. Kavita talked about purpose-driven. So it's telling the story, but one thing everyone has in common, no matter what you're doing, is you want a career path. You want to know what you're doing, especially early days. And so I find that when I first got into campus recruitment, the startups had a real almost cachet when it came to, hey, I could go there and do something exciting, right? But maybe what they didn't offer is that career path. Maybe what they didn't offer is the work-life balance that people wanted. And so what I find is what we've been able to do is say, how can we create different opportunities in our organization that offer some of the advantages of these startups, but how can we still offer some of the things that we've been offering for hundreds of years for our people, which is really great pay, really great benefits, really great culture, stable jobs, and career paths that'll take you up to leadership. And when you look at our leadership table now, only just a few years into the conversation, we have so many tech talent executives that are doing non-tech roles. And that is a massive, massive beacon to students who are in technology and say, wow, I want to do a whole bunch of different things. Because the one thing I think we can all agree on STEM talent is that they're curious by nature. And that curiosity is what enables them to want to try new things. And they want to know that the options are out there. So the last thing I'll say on my answer is the currency for students, no matter what you're studying, but I find it even more so with tech students, the currency they're after is opportunity. That's what speaks their language. So you have to build those opportunities.
Thanks, Mike. And those are definitely progressive approaches that we just didn't see 10 years ago in this sector. And I think it's working. Obviously, we see the numbers going up. Kavita, you represent a very interesting consortium that's happening in the insurance industry to attract students. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Sasha. So the example that Mike just shared, and as you said, some really sort of out of the box thinking ideas. It was very much at the Scotiabank level. But what I'd like to share, something different that we've done in the insurance industry, is really been at that consortium level. So we quickly realized that the insurance industry has an even sort of more challenging battle when it comes to sort of attracting that diverse talent that we look for, because we are not only up against some of those tech companies, but our biggest giant is sort of other organizations and more larger organizations within financial services, namely the bank, the pension firms, the consulting firms, and so forth. So already the insurance industry has perhaps been lagging behind when it came to attracting talent, because let's be honest, often when anyone has any interaction with insurance, it's a negative experience, right? But we've had to find a way of changing the perception of what insurance looks like. And we realized sort of within Swiss Re that we weren't going to be able to do that on our own. We're so small. We thought perhaps we can join forces with others in our industry. So we sort of started to think about where are some of the areas that we want to focus. So STEM background, we've heard it all. It's a huge focus for us and many other organizations. But we've also recognized that women are underrepresented within our industry. So for us, women with that STEM background is a small talent pool, and it's a competitive talent pool. And so what we did was Swiss Re co-founded the WeSTEM program. It's the Women in Insurance STEM program. And it's an industry first program in Canada, which is super exciting. And what it does is it provides insurance internships to female Canadian university students that are studying a STEM program. But where the innovation comes in is this is not a program that is run by Swiss Re alone. It's not an internal rotational program or an internal development program that we hear about and that are quite common. This is a program that partners with others in the industry, and together we've come together to create opportunities and attract talent that we potentially haven't been able to attract before. So with the help of Aspire, Sasha and Carla, you know that we created WeSTEM. We launched in early 2019, and we launched it with 7 major insurance companies in Canada. So we've got Swiss Re, Aon, Aviva, Manulife, RBC Insurance, Sun Life Financial, and Travelers. Okay, and together our goal is to diversify our talent pool in the industry. So our interns basically go through a minimum of 2 formal internship programs with 2 of the 7 founding companies. So they rotate between our organizations. And what we do is we give them the opportunity to have meaningful work. We have access to a mentor in the industry, and we put them through a curriculum to continue to develop their soft skills and the leadership capabilities that we've identified as an industry are critical for the future. And of course, the ultimate goal is to hire these individuals full time. And I want to note that majority of the roles that these interns are placed in are not the traditional insurance roles that you think of. They're not underwriting, they're not claims, they're not risk, I should say, but they're roles in data science, they're roles in innovation labs, software development, business intelligence. So things that sound a lot more sexy and cool when it comes to that insurance industry. And what we're starting to see is we're attracting talent that potentially may have pursued a different career path. And we're offering something valuable. We're offering them the opportunity to come in and explore the industry, work with 2 different companies from a rotational standpoint. And by doing that, we actually show them how big and diverse the industry is. And we've got brokerage companies, we've got the commercial and personal insurance companies, and then we've got the reinsurance companies like Swiss Re. Many students don't even realize that reinsurance exists. And more importantly, what we try to show them is that insurance is really a fundamental backbone of the economy. And if you really think, there's really not one thing that we can do without insurance, whether it's stepping out of a house, getting into a car, getting on a plane, right? It is the backbone of our economy, and we start to show how their skill set can really make a difference towards our economy, our lifestyle, and what it is that we do sort of every day. So the program is almost 2 years in. It's going really well. We're continuing to grow. We're continuing to develop that talent. And I hope that in a couple of years, I'll be sitting here in a similar panel, maybe talking about taking that program to another level and maybe even internationally. So it's super exciting for the insurance industry.
Thank you so much, Kavita. I'm such a big fan of that program. I think it's awesome. And again, it's such an example of innovation. Okay, so we've had an example at an organizational level of strategies the financial services is putting in place to attract talent. We've had an example at a consortium level. Carla, I'd now like you to give us an example of a sector level initiative that we are doing. Can you tell us about Aspire?
Absolutely, Sasha, and thanks for this opportunity. So as I mentioned in our my introduction, we partner with financial services organizations and post-secondary institutions to really help build the pipeline of in-demand work-ready talent in financial services through our Aspire program. And when we started out on this journey, we heard from employers. They said, attraction is absolutely one of our top priorities. And as Mike mentioned in his intro, he said, you know what? In the last 3 to 5 years, we've really started to look at different types of talent. And the challenge was that, as Kavita and Mike both mentioned, most of the talent that our financial services partners were looking for were are from STEM backgrounds. They have other in-demand skills, and they were saying, they have boring cultures, they're old and stale. Mike used the word old rusty dinosaurs. And so we really needed to change it up. We needed to say, okay, well, how do we attract a new type of talent to the sector? And so we decided to really focus on this idea of innovation. There are all these fantastic innovations coming out of the financial services sector, and there was an opportunity for us to rebrand what it looks like. So we've done a few things. So we've created an introduction to financial services video that we launched that really showcases that innovation and why students would want to be a part of it. We've created some fun banners and posters to help dispel some of those myths and inaccurate information. So, for example, one of our messages was, hey, financial services isn't innovative, says the guy who just tapped his chip card to purchase fish tacos. We've been featuring students like Janetta and Alice in these student spotlights to really try to showcase that, hey, students from STEM fields can find interesting opportunities in financial services, and that there's this breadth of opportunities. And then we've hosted a number of events, and whether they're in person or this year they're virtual, to really uncover opportunities. And we often feature in these webinars and events individuals working in financial services who have really cool, innovative careers in fields like AI and cryptocurrency and the Internet of Things. And oftentimes we get great attendance at these events. So at our last one in April, 44% of the students attending were actually from STEM programs. But I want to highlight, as Sasha pointed out, one key program that we've launched, and it's called the Aspire Challenge. It's sector-led, it's innovative, and it's a multifaceted work-integrated learning initiative. And it's really designed to reach that untapped talent pool, that being post-secondary second-year students who maybe haven't made up their minds about where they want to go after graduation yet, and also those coming from non-traditional financial services fields who maybe wouldn't even considered this as the sector to be in. And so the Aspire Challenge was designed to be the application phase to be very open-ended, to just simply ask second-year students to come up with a challenge that they see in their community and to think of a solution. Students who make it forward to the finals are invited to a weekend in Toronto, Canada. They get the opportunity to visit financial services workplaces. They get opportunities to participate in workshops that help build these in-demand skills like design thinking. And they compete in some competitions, and they get to network with employers. And at the end, they have an opportunity to potentially earn a summer internship with one of our financial services partners. So we've been really pleased with the Aspire Challenge. I'm sure Alice is on the panel. She'll be able to tell you more about her experience. And so I'm going to pass it back to you, Sasha.
Thank you, Carla. And yes, we've invited an Aspire Challenge finalist, Alice, to participate in our discussion. And so, Alice, let's talk about impact. You're a chemical engineering student who completed an interesting internship last year at OMERS, as you said in your introduction, one of Canada's largest pension plans. Can you share your experience in the role and how it's changed your perception as a STEM student, a target student, of financial services as a career destination?
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you, Sasha, for this. I think at OMERS, I was a part of the digital transformation team that modernized their way of working within HR, and it was truly a unique experience as I was exposed to so many different HR functions and business units that I honestly didn't even know existed. The learning curve was quite steep coming from someone with the STEM background, but I was grateful to work with such a supportive team and welcoming colleagues. As a STEM student who did not have any prior experience in the business world, I was expecting a lot of work and work that no one wants to do. But my role was truly one that was most exciting to me. I was given the opportunity to learn and be exposed to a number of business technologies and ways of working. So SharePoint, Power BI, Workday, Oracle, SAP, these are some technologies that I used and learned about to support my daily work. When I also work really closely with my team, business partners, and consultants, I was able to learn and develop several soft skills like agile thinking, communications, critical thinking. These are skills that I feel can only be developed through experience and is definitely not taught in school. I also remember having so many coffee chats with various people in OMERS that helped me understand how large organization works. So at one point, I even remember having a networking session with the former CEO, Michael Latimer. That was probably one of the most nerve-wracking moments of my life, but one that taught me how to think like a CEO. My role is to support a team in charge of planning, communicating, and procuring HR technology for the entire organization, whether it was communicating important milestones to C-suite executives or analyzing current workflow with various data sets. I always felt that the work I did was challenging and fulfilling. This is what changed my perspective of the financial services, and it is not at all boring work, and that is something that STEM students may need to realize sooner than later, honestly. I also think that the more exposure STEM students have towards this reality, the more they can find themselves interested in this industry. I think before Aspire, I wanted nothing to do with the financial services. I wanted to stick with the technical aspects of engineering. But since Aspire Challenge, I started thinking like a CEO, thinking about my different career opportunities. I've tried creating my own company, my own engineering consulting club. And really, this is also that perhaps I can also help students be more exposed to career opportunities that they didn't even know existed. So overall, I think the Aspire Challenge changed my view of the financial sector, and I really hope that more students can learn about it and use it to be more informed about greater possibilities.
Thank you so much, Alice. That is so encouraging to hear, because that's what we've been trying to do as a sector. So thank you for sharing your experience. Mark, I want to, before we end the talent attraction piece, I do want to talk about the international talent, because we know that that's an important part of our pipeline. And so, Mark, my next question is to you. What are the main strengths of Canadian post-secondary institutions? Why is Canada a popular study destination for international students, regardless of the temporary impact of the current global pandemic on international enrollment? Over to you, Mark.
Thank you so much, Sasha. Appreciate it. And thanks to everyone so far for the great comments. So Canada, first of all, itself as a country is very diverse and multicultural. So I think that is a definite attraction for international students. On top of that, we have first-class financial service institutions, and we've heard some representatives from them today. And as you can also hear, the financial institutions are recognizing, the winds of change and are looking to make changes to their talent acquisition. And so, what's also positive about post-secondary institutions, particularly the colleges, is that we're very closely aligned with our industry partners. And so, as these institutions are evolving, we are evolving with them and looking to make changes that would sort of meet their demands. So that would include everything from, creating new programs. So like we have a FinTech program that we've created that we're very proud of, and that addresses that, those new issues. I love the discussion about sort of the interdisciplinary aspect of things, of non-traditional hiring. And so we're also looking to model, while students are on campus or sort of studying, they would engage in projects that would sort of, match technology students with the accounting students and sort of start to work on projects that would also be industry focused. We also try to make sure we have technology across all of our programs. So again, to make sure that technology is being addressed. And really all this creates a situation where our graduates feel much more job ready. And so I think, Mike mentioned the idea that often when you graduate, this is how much you know, and we're hopefully making it, a little bit wider in terms of some of the experiences that they've had before they get on campus. And I think the other pieces around, the soft skills that, that's another theme that's really, been addressed. And, to Alice's point, often that's really, achieved by experiences. And so we're looking to identify experiential opportunities for students, again, while they're studying with us. And that can be things like developing, industry projects. We'll be talking a little bit later in this session about micro-credentials. And then partnering with TFI, for example, on the Aspire Edge program, where we can offer students, that experience and really get, an opportunity to develop those skills as well. So I think, again, the closeness that we have with the industry, where we can literally pick up the phone or have a meeting and for example, even most recently talk about the impact of the pandemic and talk about how the world of work is changing, in light of the pandemic. Obviously, we want to be able to speak to our students about that today, not a year from now or not 2 years from now. So the currency, I think, and the connection with the industry is really a major strength that we are proud of.
Thank you so much, Mark. Keeping on the topic of the pandemic, because that's all anybody can really talk about this year, I do want to ask one question, Mike, about that. How has the pandemic shifted your early talent strategies and plans over the short term? What changes will endure post-pandemic and into the next normal?
Yeah, I'm super passionate about this one, Sasha, because, I'll go back to what we just talked about, a couple minutes ago. You think about, I'll use Scotiabank just because I happen to work there, but I would say this of many of the players in this industry, right? Like Scotiabank is the 15th biggest bank in the world. We're one of the 100 largest public companies in the world. If we're trying to say that our industry is different, if we're trying to appeal to Janetta and Alice in a different way, and one of the 100 largest companies in the world can't nail a really great virtual student experience, what hope do we have, right? Like that's the way I look at it. What hope do we have? And so we had this conversation with our leadership going into the pandemic. So, I think it was about March 13th, I think here in Canada, where a lot of us, especially on Bay Street, we all sort of said like, okay, things are changing, we're going home. And at that point, you could imagine someone like me, what went through my mind, the first thing that went through my mind is student jobs. What's happening, right? Are we keeping the student jobs? Are they going to be okay? And it comes from a compassionate spot at first, because I think about every student and I'm thinking they have an expectation of income from us, right? We don't do unpaid internships. All of these internships are well-paid jobs. And so this helps to pay for their tuition and so on and so forth. So that was my first reaction. And I remember the conversation with leadership, and I approached it with our CHRO, and her immediate response was one that will stay with me forever, which was, I basically said to her flat out, are we keeping our interns? What do we do? And we hire upwards of 600 interns, right, in the summer alone. And so and I'm just talking about corporate offices. I'm not even talking about branches, and I'm not talking about global offices, just in Toronto. And she said to me, Mike, absolutely we are, right? We can worry now in the coming months about what that looks like, but absolutely, we've made a commitment to our people. So it's not only about doing the right thing, but it's about understanding the value of these people to our organization. We know we're going to come through the pandemic, we know we're still going to need future leaders, and that's what our students are for us. And so that was just really a great thing to hear, because for someone like me, that's winded my sails. Now it's like, okay, man, go and create something great for these people, because we like my leaders are empowering me. If I don't, that's shame on me, right? So as a team, we set out to build a really great virtual experience. And what we did is we said, let's not think about what our competitors are doing. Let's not. We don't have time for that. All we want to do is, we don't want to follow a template. We want to make the template. All right. So we sat down, we set a working group together, my team and I. We would meet for 5 hours a day, every single day, until the students started at the beginning of May. And we did that. And every day we started building stuff. We coded our own platform, because we've got those tech skills. So we coded our own platform so that students could come in and take advantage of this platform. It could be one size fits all. We went to our onboarding team and we said, listen, and actually this is when I started to hear from some of our competitors who would say things like, we're going to delay our students for a month, or we won't have technology. And I went to my team and I said flat out, guys, that's not an option. We need, again, we are one of the largest banks. We have to lead by example here. And so we had mailed out all of our laptops. Everyone was ready to go. Our VPN was ready to go, everything, so that our students could start on day one. We created an entire virtual onboarding. We created a full month-long program, because we thought that month of May right to the end, right to the beginning of June, we thought would be the most crucial. We wanted a complete 30-day virtual program, and what that would look and feel like, bringing everybody together. We needed it to be flexible for the different business lines and so on and so forth. And most importantly, we needed to have a focus on things like wellness and things like mental health, because now students are doing this for the first time, and it can be stressful and difficult, this whole brand new world. And so we created this thing. And what I loved about it is there was not an ounce of make busy work. There was not an ounce of sort of fluff. It was all about how do we provide a great experience, but that our students are still contributing to what we do. And so I would say for our brand, that was one of our biggest sort of shots in the arm. That students went through this, and then later we called it Altitude. That was what we named the program. And so, students went through it, and the feedback we got, they became our culture evangelists, because they were posting on LinkedIn all the time about, wow, like I just had this today, and my friends in this other industry, they had their job cut. And that's a really powerful message, that here we are going above and beyond to offer that. Now, your second part of your question there, Sasha, like how does it have legs, right? Like what continues on in the future as we go? Absolutely, it does. The coolest thing is that Altitude is now, then we launched Altitude in the US, then we launched it in the UK. Now we're looking at it in Latin America. So not only does it have legs during the pandemic, but this is going to be our new normal, even post-pandemic. We're all like, when's that going to happen? But post-pandemic, we know that we're still going to be Altitude. That is still going to be an offering for all of our people, just because of the amazing onboarding experience it offers. Does it need to be a full month long? Does it need to have legs for 4 months to their entire term? It doesn't necessarily, but it's that flexibility of being able to work around the different business lines, the different types of people, and what it is that they need. And the best piece of feedback I got from the whole thing, Sasha, was when students would say to me at the end, Mike, the stuff that you brought us here, the things that we learned, the exposure we had to leadership, is something we could have never gotten in class. And that's why, us working with people like Mark, for example, at Seneca, and knowing that we've got sort of we're both, let's say, focused on the same thing, which is how do we best prepare our talent to succeed. I think those are the outcomes that we're really seeing from this pandemic and the reaction to it that will live on for every organization.
Thank you for that, Mike. I actually, last week I was looking for something else and I came across some videos of students speaking on Altitude, and they were powerful. I mean, you guys are definitely making an impact based on what they were saying. That was our first theme, student attraction. I want to pivot to second theme in our webinar, which is preparing students for the workforce. And what I mean by that is we're attracting STEM's talent and other tech talent, and that's absolutely critical, but there's also another side, and employers often talk about there still being a skills gap when students transition from school to the workplace. And so, Kavita, I want to ask you this next question. When you think about the students that are coming to Swiss Re and to the insurance industry and financial services more broadly, to what extent are they work ready? What are they missing, and how are you solving for that?
Yeah, thanks, Sasha. So I think all of us will agree that when it comes to those in-demand skills, those STEM skills that we think about, we immediately think about the strong technical skills that can be helped to apply to innovation, to technology, and really what our future looks like. But I think the other piece to remember is all of these technologies and all of these innovative products have to still resonate with the customer, have to resonate with the clients, have to resonate with us. And so we're really looking for talent who are able to show those technical skills. They've got those intellectual skills that are needed in order to build and create. But they also need to have the emotional intelligence to be able to really understand the changing preferences of our customers. We need them to be able to work with employees all around the globe with different cultures, and now they need to be able to do that remotely. So they need to be adaptable to all of this. And so the theme here is that the technical skills have to be complemented by that strong soft skill set. And we often see that perhaps that is where the gap is. But by far what they bring to the table from a technical standpoint is really new, it's innovative, and that's partially why we're hiring them. But it's the soft skills that we need to pay a little bit more attention to when it comes to sort of closing that gap. So communication skills, absolutely critical. There's one thing to be able to build something, but you've then got to be able to explain what it does. You've got to be able to speak to the customers to figure out whether or not it's actually meeting their needs. Collaboration, so being able to consult with other teams, with business partners, with other stakeholders, and being able to do that effectively and efficiently. Persuasion, negotiation, the more diverse talent that we bring in, the more maybe those skill sets start to be required in order to be able to then reach conclusions and way forward. Problem solving, that's another one that goes without saying. And then I think if I think about recently, if I think over the last 8 months and sort of our interns that we've also had join us virtually, resiliency, likely one of the top skills that we're going to see all employers seeking for in their talent going forward. It's really been tested, and I think it's raised a new awareness around what that looks like, not only in new and next gen talent, but also talent like ourselves that have been in the workforce for some while. And then coming back to sort of Mark and his perspective, I think, Mark, you probably agree, it is often a challenge to keep up with what it is that the workforce is looking for. So you've got students out there that are either, they've got skills that are no longer relevant, or they don't have the right skills for what it is we're looking for. So that gap is going to continue to be there. How are organizations like ourselves trying to fill that? So I would say at Swiss Re personally, we kind of look at it twofold. And when you think about building talent capabilities, you think of that sort of buy and the build. So there are some capabilities that you have to buy, right? And often the tech piece is where that buy comes in. But then there are other capabilities that you want to try and build, and maybe that's where the soft skills come in. So at Swiss Re, we continue to leverage in-house programs that we have that focusing some of those soft skills. And I've seen a shift even in the time that I've been at Swiss Re at how those programs are being delivered and what they look like. So some will still continue to be classroom-based and more recently virtual classroom-based. But at Swiss Re, we're really seeing an increased demand from our employees and our younger generational talent at having learning at their fingertips. So they want that one-stop shop for learning, and they want to be able to access that learning at any time and from any device. And we leverage, where possible, tools and programs that are already out there. So at Swiss Re, we have something called Learning One. It is almost a one-stop shop, as I described, and it pulls in both internal programs and courses and so forth that may be available, but then we absolutely have access to LinkedIn Learning, for example, to be able to pull in some of those other skill trainings that we need. All of it can be accessed online. You can do it on the phone, on your phone when you're traveling, which I know right now is quite limited, but it's there and it's at their fingerprints whenever they want it. The other thing that we do is we absolutely want to leverage any type of external programs that we can have, and where possible, we want to use the consortium approaches, and that's where Aspire Edge comes in. And I know, Carla, you're going to be speaking about Aspire Edge shortly, but we found it to be a fantastic tool that really allows students and that newer talent to develop the skills that we value: communication, problem solving, critical thinking, teamwork. Without any of that, the tech skills alone are not going to take us far. And then financial service employers like myself, like Mike, we've helped to sort of design that program and develop that program. And so now we're truly leveraging it to help and train and developing our talent. One more example, so coming back to WeSTEM, the program that we have launched within the insurance industry, the Aspire Edge is a critical component of the learning and development curriculum that I spoke about earlier. So we do have our WeSTEM interns complete the program and they move through the tiers of the program at the appropriate pace. But we've also been lucky enough to sort of engage Carla, you and your team to kind of come in and host some of these virtual soft skills sessions as a way of really helping us develop the skill set that they need in the future.
Thank you, Kavita. And that's a good segue where this conversation has been so interesting that the hour is just flying by, but I want to stay on this skills gap section for a bit more. So Carla, over to you. Kavita has introduced the Aspire Edge. Can you tell the audience a little bit more about what that program is specifically?
Absolutely, Sasha. And I actually feel like I don't even have to say much because Kavita just gave a wonderful introduction. So yes, the Aspire Edge was designed with that thought in mind, where we said, okay, employers, what does it take for a student to be work ready? And overwhelmingly, they came back to us and said, we really want to help build those soft skills. They're learning all the great technical skills at schools like Seneca, where Mark is, but help us build the soft skills. And so actually over the last year, and with the help of employers, even like Kavita, who's featured in a video in the Aspire Edge, we built out an online business skills development program. And it's a really interesting experience because it's set up as an online simulation where students are thrown into this fictional financial services company. It's called NextGen Financial Services, and they get a chance to explore and develop those soft skills through real life workplace scenarios. And so, as Kavita mentioned, we have built this program to put students through 3 tiers. They start out as an analyst, and they start to learn skills around communication, even simple things like email etiquette. They build some basic data acumen because we've all heard, and in FinTech, being able to understand data is important. And they start to develop those resiliency skills by throwing monkey wrenches at them, and they have to overcome them. They then advance through the program in tiers 2 and 3, where they become part of a special team. They get thrown in to design a solution to a problem, and then eventually they become a new manager trainee, and they're challenged to develop their leadership skills and to really help to understand how to work with their team, to delegate and to manage conflict. So yes, the program was launched in July. It's pandemic proof because it's online, and we're really pleased. We have about 1,300 students who've enrolled in the program thus far. 700 are actively participating, and we're now up to about close to 150 graduates of the program. And what's great is that those who complete the full program, they get a chance to earn a digital badge that they can post on their social media channels. And this gives them a chance to be able to showcase their achievement to employers like Mike and Kavita, who are looking for talent that don't just have technical skills, but also have shown that they've developed those soft skills that are going to make them successful in the workplace.
Thank you so much, Carla. And it's one thing for us to build a program and hope that they'll come and hope it'll be of value. But let's hear from a student, a student's perspective. is the EDGE working? Is it hitting its mark? And so Janetta, you're a mathematics and statistics student who completed an 8-month internship with us. And so obviously we would have hoped you would have liked the EDGE program because you helped to build it, but you really became an advocate of the program since doing it. And so I'm interested in your perspective. What did you find so valuable about the EDGE, and what do you know that others, after completing it, that other students don't?
Thanks, Sasha. I've definitely become a strong advocate for the Aspire EDGE, and that's honestly because of how valuable I found it to be during my internship experience. I actually started it at the beginning of my internship, and this was actually my first co-op experience ever, working in a professional environment. And like Kavita and Carla mentioned, I come from a STEM background, so I had those technical skills. However, I think I was still lacking in some of those, soft skills that are necessary for a professional environment. And so I was really thankful that I started this program, because in Tier 1, I learned a lot about the, business etiquette and do's and don'ts that you should know when starting a professional work experience that, people who work in the industry may know already, but it's not so obvious to students. And, I learned things like creating an effective email and preparing a verbal synopsis, also preparing a formal presentation, all skills that really fortified my communication skills, which is exactly what I wanted to do. And I'm really glad, because now I can take that with me in future work opportunities. But also, I think that the Aspire EDGE is helpful for any student, not just those who are starting their work experience or their first professional job experience. I think it's helpful for those that are returning to another co-op term, or those that are looking for a full-time job experience, because the Aspire EDGE actually dives into more complex skills in tiers 2 and 3, and you learn how to work in a high-performing team, problem-solving skills, critical thinking skills, and even skills that you learn as you progress in your job role, like how to be an effective manager. So I definitely think that it's very helpful for students in those situations. But also, what if you haven't secured a job role yet? How can it be helpful for you then? Well, you can actually bring up the Aspire EDGE in your interview experience. You can actually, I think this is actually really going to impress employers, because even if you don't have that professional work experience, you can actually bring up the skills that you've learned in the program and how you can apply them in your job experience. And I think that this shows them that you actually took the time to learn those skills. And I think that it can really help you stand out in the competitive job market that there is today. And so honestly, I recommend the Aspire EDGE to any student or any friends that I know that are, looking to work in financial services. And, especially if it's their first co-op experience, I'm like, have you started the Aspire EDGE? So I definitely really am fond of this program, and I'm so glad that I took it. And I'm definitely going to, take those skills that are definitely transferable for future job opportunities and for interviews. So, yeah.
Thank you so much for that. I think that is a good way to end this discussion on skills, because I think we've taken it from the hard skills that the sector is looking for, but then we're also helping to prepare students to transition with those hard skills, to be work ready and hit the ground running. So I appreciate you sharing your experience about a skill program that helps to build that soft skill set that rounds out your skill set. I want to circle back. We are almost out of time, and so this is likely maybe our last question. But I want to circle back to this idea of industry academia collaboration, because it is quite a strong concept in Canada. We've been quite successful at it. And so, Mark, perhaps you can close us off with talking about, you spoke a little bit in the first question I asked you about our success with industry academia collaboration, but what would you add? Can you give us an example of innovation that's happening in this country as a result of this partnership, of this collaboration?
Yeah. Thank you so much, Sasha. So I think, first of all, the connections with industry really allow us to have students have those experiences that move them away from the idea that, you know, business or any profession they'd be entering is linear or is black and white. We want them to see that it's actually not that at all. And so that's everything from having program advisory committees that inform our programs, faculty who are working in industry, guest speakers, and so on. And so all of that really gives students these different exposures and touch points where they can really see, you know, what the profession or industry would actually be like. I think the biggest innovation that we're looking at right now, and you know, Kavita and Mike, you know, have talked about sort of in-house programs that they're running, which are amazing and really music to my ears. We're partnering with industry around micro credentials, so that's sort of moving away from more traditional long, you know, diplomas or degrees to very short, bite-sized programming that would meet an immediate need, you know, in their business. And obviously, we would want to develop those, you know, in connection with industry to make sure it's useful and valuable. And you're going to see governments, you know, putting a lot of money towards this, and I think this will be a new wave in education where those longer programs are definitely important and can provide foundational skills, absolutely. But the micro credentials will allow students to upskill and keep current, particularly in areas of technology, and you know, FinTech being a good example. So we're, for example, you know, we're developing a micro credential in artificial intelligence right now, relevant to the financial services industry, that we hope to launch in the new year.
Thank you for that, Mark. We are almost out of time, so I don't think we have time for any more questions. I want to thank you all. I think we've told quite a fulsome story with respect to going from student attraction through to student preparation and what we're doing in Canada to help our post-secondary students transition, but also to grow the pipeline of financial services talent. That ends our session for today. Thank you for joining. That concludes the World FinTech Festival in Canada. We hope you enjoyed learning more about Canada's innovation ecosystem. If you have any questions about any of our sessions, please reach out to Toronto Finance International by visiting tfi.ca. Thank you so much to our panelists for joining today, and audience, thank you very much for joining. Goodbye.